Here's a question for Pokemon fans. How many Pokemon battles have you played that were actually fun? No, seriously, how many? I think most of you can name a few fights from Pokemon games that were really exciting and memorable, but the majority are just bland. And I'm not saying this because I don't like Pokemon games. I actually really enjoy them. But while making my own Pokemon-inspired indie rhythm game RPG Tempo Tamer, I have decided that it's time to make some big upgrades to the nearly 30-year-old battle system of Pokemon. Here's how it's going. The first gripe I have with Pokemon battling and turn-based combat in general is the lack of skill expression in each battle. There's a lot of room for strategy in turn-based combat, but most battles just don't hit that sweet spot where the player is rewarded for creative strategy. Often either your party is over-leveled and you sweep your enemies without thought, or your team is under-leveled and no matter how smart you play it, you're probably going to lose. That's why in Tempo Tamer, each battle starts with the player tapping to the beat in a short rhythm game song to build up their tempo power. Better rhythm game performance rewards the player with higher tempo power, and higher tempo power makes all of your attacks more impactful. So now, even if your party is technically weaker than your opponents, you can still earn the win. Another problem with a game like Pokemon is how a vast majority of the creatures are just flat out worse than others. In competitive Pokemon battling, a lot of players play on something called Pokemon Showdown. Pokemon Showdown uses a tier-based selection format. Basically, some of the Pokemon are so overpowered and unbalanced that the game basically becomes unplayable when they're available, so they use different tiers to separate the really strong Pokemon from the worst ones. Without constant moderation of the tiers, the game just gets boring because everyone starts to use the same teams that are just objectively better than all the other options. When everyone's using the same creatures and strategies, a creature collecting game just gets boring. So how did I solve this? Well, the only reason that players can jump to the best strategies so quickly in Pokemon is because you control each Pokemon in the exact same way. Sure, some have different moves and different stats, but someone who's good at playing with a Pokemon like Charizard isn't going to be any worse at using a Blaziken, for example. In my game Tempo Tamer, the creatures that you fight with are called Beachers, and the type of rhythm game that you play for each one is different. Some Beachers, like this Twistier, have a rhythm mode like this, a vertical scrolling rhythm game like how games such as Guitar Hero, Friday Night Funkin', DDR, or Project Sekai work. But if you're using the beacher called Cappy Bongo, you'll be playing through this bongo mode based on games like Taiko no Tatsujin or Osu Taiko. The benefit of including a variety of rhythm game modes like this is that everyone can use the beachers that are most fun for them to use. There won't be such a rigid meta to how you play the game since each player is best with a different selection of rhythm games. A Taiko player could form a balanced team of beachers who all use the bongos mode and still succeed against someone who uses the beachers who are strongest on paper, but who they might not be as good at controlling. Now, combining the rhythm gameplay with this strategic combat sounds fun, but that fun would really start to fade if you're just playing through the exact same songs over and over again. I mean, imagine going through the same song in every fight just because that's the optimal choice. That really spoils the fun of it, doesn't it? To solve this issue, I came up with a couple solutions. The first solution was the most direct. You don't play through the entirety of the song that you select in Tempo Tamer. Instead, you play a 20 to 30 second snippet of the song. So to promote diversity, I split each song into different segments, and one is chosen at random for you to play whenever you select that song. As an example, if you select a song that is 2 minutes long, I might divide that into 4 30-second sections. Then one of those 4 sections gets selected for you to play. Now, even if you play the same song over and over, the gameplay isn't quite as repetitive. The next solution that I use is one to encourage players to pick a variety of different songs, depending on the situation that they're in. You see, each song that you unlock has a bonus trait that helps you in battle. This song, for example, grants you extra tempo power when you use it at low health. So maybe if you're choosing a song to play while your beacher is close to fainting, but you just need one powerful hit to knock your opponent out, you'd choose this song over any other one. On the topic of rhythm gameplay getting stale, there have been a lot of people in the community who have expressed concerns about the difficulty level of the songs in Tempo Tamer. Some diehard rhythm game fans are worried that all the charts will be too easy for them, and some of those inexperienced with rhythm games are fearful that the songs will be too hard for them to enjoy playing. I don't want to make anyone play a rhythm game at a difficulty that's just straight up too hard or too easy for them, so I let the players set their own difficulty level. If you can full combo a song on the medium difficulty, you'll unlock the hard difficulty for that song and get a bit more tempo power for playing well on the increased difficulty. Alternatively, if you just want to play each song at the easiest level, you won't be punished at all for your choice. In Tempo Tamer, both strategic play and rhythmic skill will help you win battles, so how you play the game is really up to you. If you're interested in Tempo Tamer, please go ahead and give this video a like. It really helps more people discover the game and join the conversation. Now, going back to Pokemon battle mechanics that I think are way outdated, I want to talk on the subject of IVs and EVs. IVs, or individual values, are random numbers generated for each stat on a Pokemon that determines how high that stat should be in comparison to a different one of the same type. For example, if one level 50 Pikachu has a speed IV of 31, the maximum possible value, then its speed stat will be 110. But if another level 50 Pikachu has a speed IV of 0, then its speed stat will only be 95. There's nothing inherently wrong with IVs, but the way that they're randomly determined is really unfair and makes hunting for a perfect IV Pokemon extremely tedious. It's almost impossible to change the IVs of a Pokemon after you catch it, which means that competitive players are forced to spend hours and hours breeding each Pokemon to get the right IVs. And let's say you catch a Pokemon that really means a lot to you. Maybe it was your first starter Pokemon, or maybe it's a shiny Pokemon that you spent 100 hours resetting for. Well, unless that Pokemon was blessed with god tier genetics, then it's pretty much doomed to never be competitively viable. Next, EVs, which stands for effort values, are similar to IVs, except they're raised through knocking out wild Pokemon. Basically, just mow down 200 Digletts with your Pikachu and its speed stat will get a little bit higher. But make sure you don't accidentally knock out some Jigglypuffs, or else your HP stat will get raised instead, which is less important, and then you have to force feed your Pokemon a bunch of berries for some reason, and then you'll be able to reassign those HP EVs back into speed. EVs are comically overcomplicated in Pokemon, and even the hardcore Pokemon players have to look up what EV a Pokemon will drop when you knock it out, because it's just not intuitive. So to summarize the issues with IVs and EVs, they take way too much time of mindless grinding to get perfect, they're really not clear to the players, and they hurt the player for playing the games normally and forming a bond with their favorite Pokemon. Now, unless you're planning on playing Pokemon competitively, IVs and EVs don't matter much. But why force competitive players to jump through so many hoops to get viable Pokemon? It's so bad that a lot of players just play with cheated in Pokemon since it saves hundreds of hours of training. So why do these stats even exist at all? Well, without IVs and EVs, each type of Pokemon at the same level would be practically identical, and these stats help make each one feel unique. So in Tempo Tamer, I wanted to keep the personalization benefits of IVs and EVs, but tone the time investment way down and prevent them from ever being set in stone. My replacement to these systems is a new mechanic that I call personal values, or PVs for short. Very innovative name, I know. The way that PVs work is that they're numbers that represent each stat, just like IVs and EVs, and they're randomized for each wild feature, like IVs too. But you can improve them at any point. You see, there are 2 stages to each PV. Each PV can get to 50, no problem. Heck, you could theoretically find a feature with 50 in each stat naturally, but after 50, the points fall into the bonus stage. You have 100 bonus PVs to give to your beachers, and each stat can have a max of 50 bonus PVs. This means that you could have a beacher with 100 HP and attack PVs, and 50 in defense and speed, or you could have one with 75 in HP, attack, defense, and speed. You just can't go above 100 PVs with any stat, and each PV over 50 takes away from your bonus PV pot of 100. Now, I know this sounds just as complicated as IVs and EVs, which it kind of is, but I promise it works so much better than the other systems. Now, I said that you could increase your PVs at any time, but I also said they're random, so how does that work? So basically, you raise PVs by playing through some songs with the beacher. Each time you play a song with your beacher, you get something like 4 PVs to allocate to whichever stats you want. This means that if you happen to tame a beacher that has high PVs already, that could save you quite a bit of time of grinding for more PVs. But I hope to balance the mechanics so that the beachers that you use the most will be able to max out their PVs through the course of a normal playthrough, without any need of extra grinding. Additionally, instead of force-feeding your beachers rare berries to lower their PVs if you want to reallocate those points, there will be a much easier way to reset your PVs to 50 in any given stat, and then choose where to put those bonus PVs that you just shaved off, saving you even more time. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that very technical and lengthy explanation of personal values in Tempo Tamer. For anyone who skipped through that section or just needs a very quick recap, I basically just reinvented Pokemon's IVs and EVs systems to make something for my game that isn't nearly as time consuming and unfair. Alright, the next battle mechanic from Pokemon that I'm fixing for my game is something that I think is actually pretty cool, just not executed super well. That is the nature system. A Pokemon's nature is like its personality, and it affects its stats. It might have a modest nature that lowers its attack and increases its special attack by 10%, or it might have a jolly nature that lowers its special attack and increases its speed. The problem with natures in Pokemon is how they're chosen, which, again, is completely randomly and outside of the control of a player. Natures can be really impactful on the strength of your Pokemon, so it really sucks when your Pokemon that's supposed to be super tanky isn't actually so strong defensively because it was given a defense-lowering nature at birth. Similar to IVs, I don't think the issue with natures is explicitly because of the randomness. It just isn't cool how the player gets no control over it. In Tempo Tamer, I combine natures into an entirely new mechanic that I call attributes. Attributes are a very diverse group of traits that you can give to your beachers to make them stronger in ways that work for your specific playstyle. You can own an endless number of attributes on each beacher, but you can only equip 3 of them. Or 2 of them. I haven't decided yet. I'm just gonna go with 3 for this video, but that might change in the future. There are a few types of attributes. The first is most similar to natures from Pokemon. They work pretty much identically, where one raises one stat and lowers another. The second type is a rhythm changing attribute. These can be useful for players with extreme aptitude in rhythm games, and those on the other end of the spectrum that might have a lot of trouble with the difficulty of rhythm games. I want the game to be enjoyable for children and people with disabilities, so I'm doing what I can to accommodate all ranges of rhythm skill. Here are some examples of rhythm-changing attributes. Make the timing windows for perfect accuracy more strict, but grant higher tempo power for songs played. This one will only really be beneficial if you're really precise with your timing. Alternatively, one attribute makes the timing window for perfect accuracy more lenient, but it will grant a bit less tempo power. But finally, there will also be some more specific attributes, like maybe something like slightly reduce the damage from incoming super effective attacks, but make your own super effective attacks do slightly less damage as well. When you tame a beacher, it will have at least one attribute that's randomly chosen, but it could have more if you're lucky. I plan on expanding the methods for gaining or inheriting attributes, but one idea that I have is to include NPCs and villages that can transfer attributes from one beacher to another of the same type. So if you caught a Hunktopus with a rare attribute that you want to put on your Capybongo, you can have that NPC make the transfer since they're both percussion type. At the bare minimum, attributes will always be better than natures because you can always just choose to unequip your attributes. In Pokemon, there's pretty much no way to just turn off your harmful natures on your favorite Pokemon. Tempo Tamer has quite a bit of strategic depth in its unique rhythm mechanics, so in order to prevent it from becoming too complicated and hard to learn, I'm also shedding some of the battle mechanics from Pokemon entirely. For one, not very effective attacks simply don't exist in Tempo Tamer. Pokemon places a lot of strategic weight on type effectiveness, which I think is all just a bit too arbitrary. Like, for some reason, bug-type attacks deal twice as much damage against Psychic-type Pokemon, but if you try to attack a Steel-type Pokemon with a Poison move, it will do literally nothing. My goal with Tempo Tamer was for nobody to ever have to look up a type chart to plan out their attacks, so I simplified it all to just 3 types. There's Percussion, String, and Wind. These types represent the kind of instrument that the beacher is based on. Capybongo uses bongo drums, so he's percussion. Percussion deals 1.5 times damage against String, String deals 1.5 times damage to Wind, and Wind deals 1.5 times damage against Percussion. Early development has shown that I keep coming up with more percussion type beaters than the other types, so if development keeps going like this, I might end up splitting percussion types so there are 4 types in total, but I'd also love to hear everyone else's opinions on the type effectiveness system in Tempo Tamer. I know it's a drastic simplification from Pokemon, but What do you all think? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what other people have to say. Okay, that's all the mechanics I wanted to cover today. I really think Tempo Tamer has the opportunity to have more entertaining battles than Pokemon, but developing games takes a lot of effort. I want to let you all know that your words of encouragement help me so much in getting through the challenges of development. If you want to stay updated about my progress on Tempo Tamer, please subscribe so you can see all my videos when they come out. I have a Discord, which I'll link in the description, that I made for anyone interested in Tempo Tamer, so feel free to join that if you want to hear about development progress or if you just want to chat. Alright, bye!